You're listening to the VORTX Podcast, featuring interviews with your favorite artists. Here's your host, Ethan Jackson.
Hey, it's Ethan. Today we are hanging out with our special guest, Doc Coyle from the band Bad Wolves. Doc, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. Was it today, Thursday?
I think so.
We're taking Thursday by the horns. All right. That's what's going on.
That we are, man. I'm stoked to chat with you. We talked a couple years ago at Rocklahoma, I think it was. So that was actually before DL was in the band and all of that stuff. So it's nice to catch up with you again. And you guys recently just dropped a new track with Nick Nocturnal, Octane, which is incredibly badass. I'm curious about how that one came together. Was it you guys that approached Nick, or how did that work?
So if you're familiar with Nick Nocturnal, he does these like mini 30-second songs where he'll take a trope, or usually it's based around a band, right? He'll be like, how to Disturbed in 30 seconds, or how to Slaughter to Prevail in 30 seconds, or whatever. And then if it gets enough attention or people are hyped on it, he'll make a full song and then usually incorporate, people from that band, or at least other bands that kind of can imitate what that band sounds like. And in this case, he did a how to Octane core in 30 seconds. And Octane, the actual station at Sirius XM, took an interest and said, hey, if you actually make this into a song, we'll play it on the air. And I guess based off that, his first instinct was to reach out to us and talk to DL about singing on it. And we were on tour at the time when we were first approached. So we actually tried to record it on a day off on tour and kind of put it all together. It didn't really come together in that day. So we just waited till we got off tour, and then DL worked on it at home. And then, and what you hear is what it is. So it's a lot of fun.
It's rad. There's a couple of cool like little references in there. I know you guys shout out Aftershock Festival. Is that right?
So the original version was really like tongue in cheek. It was like really like we're like shouting out Jose Mangan. We're like, talk like going like they cut out a line like that I said. It was in the breakdown, and it was "Don't call us butt rock." So I was trying to make it really funny, and
right.
then and everyone else kind of reined in, and their instincts are probably correct. I'm always I always want to kind of go a little over the top, but it's basically like lampooning the genre but also celebrating it at the same time.
No, that's rad. And you guys just put out a full-length LP back in November, Die About It. That record itself, kind of like Octane, is heavy. Lyrically, it's really, really great. DL, something that I was impressed with since he's joined the band is how many vocal styles he's really able to show off. Tell me a little bit about putting that record together.
Just speaking to the vocal aspect of it, a lot of the stuff he was developing on the new record is new. He wasn't those like rapping sections, things like that. He didn't do that on the previous record. He developed this kind of like deathcore, very like subterranean kind of growl thing that totally just discovered a new voice while making the record. But in terms of like how the record came together, we started writing in between tours in 2022, like kind of hardcore. So we went out with Papa Roach and Hollywood and Dead, came home like, all right, let's get in the studio. And we just started, just like going, all right, let's get back to like finding out who we are, So we started out, and like the first handful of songs were like very traditional, like heavy Bad Wolves kind of tunes. And then that was the first session. I was like, oh, that was cool. We got some good stuff. And the second time was like, all right, let's do some different things. Let's like whatever we think we're supposed to do, let's do the opposite of that. And then a lot, songs like NDA, which is like one of like more kind of different songs we've ever done, things like that came out. And and we just kind of grinded, in between tours, and DL was writing stuff. So a couple of the songs were songs he had these songs from years before, but we kind of just refabricated them for now. And yeah, it just slowly came together. And then January 2023, we went in the studio for like a month and just started like finishing as much as possible. And then by the end of it, we had pretty much the semblance of what the record would be.
Yeah, I was gonna mention, you mentioned like finding what the sound would be like. It really did feel to me where the previous record, um, Dear Monsters, it was solid, it was really good, but it did feel like you're trying to figure out a little bit what to do with the new voice, right? You know, you're trying to kind of like figure out what the band is now, and then this album, Die About It, really feel like you found that sound.
Well, I think at the end of the day, you have to. I think this for Dear Monsters, we in our head it was like we can't veer too much from what the band is known for.
Mm,
That's what we were thinking, because I think when you have such a big shift, you're hoping to kind of retain fans and make it not too weird and not take too many big risks, even though there are a handful of songs on Dear Monsters that are like different for us. And
right.
this time we just said, call that. Just, you know, let's do what we want to do. Don't worry about making some version of a fan happy. Let's make ourselves happy. Let's make the record we want to listen to. And and to me, all the most interesting stuff is the stuff where you're taking risks and where you're doing something because it just feels fresh. It kind of tickles the creative creative part of yourself a lot more when you feel like you're venturing into new ground and not just here, let's adhere to this formula. Let's this old song was successful, let's just do that.
Right. I mean, you guys had saxophone on the album, so that's something that's really different. That's something that I really enjoyed. I was listening to the record the other day at the gym, and I think I tweeted it. I was like, "Dude, this is the most underrated record from 2023." You know, I
Well,
feel
it came
like
out
so
late here. I feel like
it did.
anytime a record comes out late, it tends to kind of get overlooked for like, albums of the year and things like that. But that's what this year is about like, hey, we made this record, we're really proud of it. Let's go and kind of show the world, by performing these songs live and making music videos and different things like that.
Right. Now, you guys also just put out a new track a couple weeks ago before Octane came out, Knife came out. And that's the first song I believe that featured AJ, who was in the band Issues. They just wrapped up their run with some farewell shows. Tell me a little bit about bringing him into the Bad Wolves family.
Well, so we've had kind of some, how do I put it, some uh issues, no pun intended,
Yeah,
keeping a guitar player pretty much since 2022. Our guitar player Chris Kane was there since the beginning. We had a falling out on tour and he left the tour, and then we had some fill-ins, and then we were playing as a four-piece, and then Max, the guitar player who originally started the band with John, rejoined. And he's been a part of, like, even when he wasn't quote unquote in the band, he works on every record. So Max
right.
is almost like the sixth member of the band, even still. But he toured with us for about a year before kind of just feeling like that it wasn't the right thing to be touring full time in a band, but he's still like in the family. And so I was actually out with Ice Nine Kills last year. I was really busy, but I was like, okay, we need a new guitar player. Let's really like hammer this down and see who's out there and see who we can get, that we would feel like could be in the band and not just like a fill-in, not just someone who's
Mm,
just going to be kind of like, a work for hire kind of thing. Because there's plenty of people out there you can just pay and they'll do the job and it's fine. But um and I literally just went through all my contacts, my social media. I was like, who's out there, who do I know, and AJ, I didn't know him personally, but we had followed each other, and I was a big fan of Issues, and I was like, man, this guy kind of like has the stylistically understands the kind of musical vocabulary that we kind of speak through, and he lived in LA, and I was like, all right, let me just, and it didn't seem like he was doing anything, and like he was in another band, so I just hit him up. He was like, he was interested, and kind of like it kind of worked out pretty perfectly because he wasn't involved in a new project, and Issues was winding down, and man, his talent level is just like off the charts, and he fits with us very well personality wise. And it could have worked out any better, and he has this amazing scream that I didn't even know about. At the time I just thought he was a great guitar player. And then the idea, so the song Knife, that was one of the first things we wrote. like what I was talking about, the sessions of, and it was like our probably the best thing, or thing we were most excited about from an instrumental standpoint when we were working on the record, but it wasn't quite right. And so
Mm.
that's why we didn't include it on the album. And it's like, we have something that has that high potential, you got to get it right before you put it out. And his vocals and the arrangement, and all of a sudden now it's like, you know, as good or better than anything on the record. But I kind of like that though. The way things work now is it doesn't have to be on the album. You kind of put it out as its own thing, make a little lyric video, and it gets more attention that way
Mm.
than if you would have just buried it on the record and it'd be track 11 or something.
For sure. When it comes to albums versus singles, are you an albums guy?
I'm an albums guy in terms of, the way I consume music. I like a band, I'm listening to your album. I want to kind of be in the zone of a particular band for 30, 40, 50 minutes.
Mm.
I want to see what you have to say in that medium. But I totally understand especially in our world, like you see bands like Bring Me the Horizon or Falling in Reverse, and um, so a lot of these bands, they kind of really focus things on singles. And I think it's a better way of kind of creating like a litmus test of what people are vibing with, right? So if you put out 5 songs over the course of a year and they're all kind of different, and you go, okay, people seem to like this, but they kind of like this, and you get an idea of like, okay, what's working, what's not working. And I think the songs get a lot more attention that way, and people get to actually sit with it and live with it. And if unfortunately with Bad Wolves, I do think from our fans' perspective, they are more of a singles audience than they are an album audience. So I feel like we have all these songs that we really love, but maybe they don't get the attention that we feel like they deserve. So I think it's an ongoing debate, especially internally. We don't our label makes a lot of those decisions in terms of how things are released, and that's kind of something we're always trying to figure out how to kind of do that. But I do think for us, probably releasing things as singles, it can always eventually come out as an album,
Mm.
but I think the way it's rolled out in the single format, I think is more effective from a marketing standpoint and getting attention on the individual songs.
For sure. You guys are a band too that kind of I don't want to say blew up, but you gained a lot of popularity because of your cover of Zombie. And so I was curious, when it comes to that aspect of the band, is Zombie going to live on your guys' set list forever? Because you see bands like Shinedown who play Simple Man every night because the fans love it. But then you have bands like I Prevail who they blew up on a Taylor Swift cover that was very first thing that they put out. And now it's off the set list and has been for a while. So I'm curious how you guys look at that song.
I mean, listen, it's a gift and a curse, right? Where it's so much bigger than anything we've ever done. And we've had some really, we have songs on Spotify that have, 70 million streams. We've had, besides Zombie, we've had 5 other songs go #1 at Active Rock Radio.
Mhm.
You know, a couple of, songs have gone gold. So that's not our only hit, quote unquote,
Right.
but it sits in its own space. And I think at some point we have to like put it down for a minute. You know, has that time happened yet? Probably not. And
Mm.
and I think the reason why we kind of make it a point to play it, especially a lot of the tours we do, if we're going out with Papa Roach or we're going out with Bush, that might be the only song a certain individual in that crowd might know. And obviously they know the Cranberries one, but even our version is very, it's a big, it has a 500,000,000 plays on YouTube. I mean, this
Mhm.
thing is really like in its own sphere. Um, and so it's something like, for example, if we go on tour and we play Zombie and then we look on like Instagram, I'd say 90% of people tagging us in videos is from that song.
Right.
So it's still like this moment that I think is a rallying point for the band. And I think there has to be a point where we go, hey, let's just like put it on the shelf for a minute. And I think we'll be fine, right? But there's definitely going to be those people going, they didn't play Zombie, right? Like there's, it's like going to see, you know, um, Bon Jovi, they don't play like Living on a Prayer or something like that for certain people. And we kind of play with that, with every set list, because if you go to our like top songs on Spotify or something, or our top videos, it's a pretty predictable collection of songs, but you don't just want to do that. You want to represent other aspects of the band. Then you have a new record and you want to like, well, we have to showcase this new material. You have a new single and you have to kind of, create the space so that a new song can become that big hit that people want to listen to. So it is, trust me, it's something I think about all the time, right? Because you think about, bands like Radiohead, right? Like they wouldn't play Creep for a long time, or Tool wouldn't play Sober for a long time.
Mm.
Um, because that one song tends to outshine. And you have to decide what kind of band you're going to be, because some bands are like, we are artists and we're not going to kind of placate that, and some bands are like, no, we're populists, we got to give the people what they want. And I think we're somewhere in the middle, and we haven't done a lot of like super big headline sets where we're playing really expansive sets. So when we're doing like 30-40 minutes opening up for another act, you have to kind of figure out what's going to get the most out of it, how you're going to connect with people the most. And it's still a big moment. I mean, very, very big moment in the set live. So it's still a process, but I totally vibe with the question, because I do think about it.
Oh, for sure. You guys actually have a tour coming up. You guys are going to be out with POD this spring. Norma Jean on that bill as well. This is a killer lineup, dude. I'm stoked about this. I saw POD actually for the first time last year. Don't know how I made it that long without seeing them. And they crushed live. So I'm super stoked for this tour. Planning for something like this, planning for an opening set. How long do you get on this tour? 30, 40 minutes, something like that?
I'm assuming we'll get anywhere from 40 to 45 minutes. I'm still waiting. It's funny you mentioned this, because I was literally putting together a mock set list last night. And so the last tour we did was with Bush, and Bush is, from a like, I guess, similar era as POD, but even earlier, right? They're talking mid 90s they came out, and
Right.
in a bit on the like lighter side in terms of like the types of audience. So we kind of factored our set list to play some, kind of focus on some of the stuff that did well on radio, and things like that, so people would vibe with it. And this time, especially when we found out that Norma Jean was on tour, it's like, yo, we need to kind of come with some gusto in the set. We can't have these bucks out here blowing us off the stage, making us look soft. So so we're still trying to figure that out, but I think we're gonna lean a little bit more towards the heavier side of our catalog, which is fun. But dude, it's always, especially now we're 4 albums in, it gets harder and harder to fit. You want at least one or two songs off each album if you can, but we're also like really focused on presenting this new album, and playing these songs and performing them. I think that's like almost part of the album, is like how people connect with it live. And I'm the type of guy, like, no matter what band I'm in, I want to play as much of those songs. It doesn't mean not at the same time, but like over the course of a couple years, if you have an album with 12 songs, maybe you play 8 of those songs or 9 of those songs, and mix it up, and give different looks, and kind of, play some deep cuts and things like that. So it's hard. Trust me, it is a game of musical chairs, literal musical chairs, every time. But I love it. It's one of my favorite things, is like figuring out the set list. It's like a puzzle.
Do you guys like to do the same set list for a whole tour, or do you like to, switch it up, go every other show, that kind of thing?
So I personally like mixing it up, but Bad Wolves, we're part of this kind, the new way of the way bands do things. Essentially, we have like a playback rig, and
Mm.
everything is on like this program called Ableton. So we have like backing tracks and clicks and interludes, and everything is kind of all sequenced, and it makes it very difficult. You would literally have to like build sessions with like different songs. And then what I noticed with this band, at least, is people tend to not like mixing things up. They like the predictability of it all. And me, I feel like there's good and bad things to that, because if you're playing something every day, you get really good at playing that material, but then your body kind of and mind get something about the repetition screws you up, where you get like, it gets a little Groundhog Day. So I think it's good to kind of like give yourself a little bit of variety. But unfortunately, you kind of have to you're at the whim of the collective and also the technical side of like switching things up. And I find that that's pretty common. That it's, you know, a lot of bands kind of do that unless they're really adamant about switching things up. You know, like I've seen like Papa Roach, they'll be on tour and they'll just, you know, drop a song they've been playing or put a cover in. And I respect that, you know. And also Metallica's my favorite band, and they're the kings of changing up the set list. And I vibe with that. So maybe in the future, we'll see.
For sure. You mentioned Metallica. You were out with them last year for a while with Ice Nine Kills filling in for Dan. And you're in a band with half of Metallica as well, the wedding band. So was that touring process a little different for you than maybe the other guys? Like, are you hanging out with Kirk and Rob on the side while maybe everybody else hangs out in the green room? How does that all work out?
Um, I mean, I don't think I mean, just outside of just like being in touch with the guys and like, you know, texting and then, you know, they would have these like after party things where pretty much everyone was invited. So I had my own connection with those guys, but for the most part, they're like they'll come to your dressing room and like say what's up and hang out, or you'll be on your way to the stage and they'll stop you and mix it up and chat it up. And they're very, very personable, and they go out of their way to like make you feel welcome. Um and but a lot of times, like on like a show day, for example, I would almost like purposefully like not bother them because I just, you know, they're only doing 2 shows a week, and those days are like, you know, they kind of have to be in their own world, and I almost
Right.
don't want to bug them, you know, unless they like, you know, hit me up, hey, come over here, or something like that. But yeah, man, that was an absolute privilege, you know, just to be a part of anything like that. That was the second time I got to tour with Metallica, first time I've ever been in like stadiums or anything like that. So just to be a little piece of history, just to kind of be like a cog in that wheel and have those memories and those experiences. It was really, really something I think I'll remember for the rest of my life.
For sure. What was the process like learning all of those Ice Nine Kills songs and having to kind of perfect those before going out and playing for their fans?
Well, it's kind of a nightmare because, as you said, I was actually originally supposed to fill in for Dan, and when they called me, they only gave me like a week before they wanted to rehearse, and there was like 17 or 18 songs. They had no learning materials, and kind of even like the audio they were sending me and things like that was kind of poorly done. Um, And so I was a little bit behind the ball on things. So they ended up bringing in Miles, another guitar player, to play lead. And so I was learning all the, you know, working on trying to learn all these leads. And then I had to switch right at the end to rhythm. So even when we were still rehearsing, I hadn't even learned all the rhythms. And then, like maybe 3 or 4 days before rehearsals were done, they had showed me all the vocal stuff I had to learn.
Mm.
So I had to like cram learning lyrics and vocal melodies, plus still I was done rehearsing with the band and still learning the music when I was away from it. So it was kind of a cluster learning it and extremely stressful, but ultimately it worked out for the better because their solos are like out of control. It's like next level hard. And I think I can do it, but in the time frame that I was given, I'm like, I'm not good enough to do it in that time in the way it was done. But I still want to learn those solos. So, you know, just in case, you know, it comes down, Doc Clo can do it.
There you go. Was it weird getting used to all of the theatrics they have live? And then, of course, you're wearing what, like a suit or a tux
Yeah.
performing and all of that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, especially the first day, it was like, because when we rehearsed, we didn't really do like a dress rehearsal with like full suits and then the mask changes. So like the first day, it's like, here's your mask, here's this, put this, you know, and you're like, what the hell am I doing? This is like, you know, you joke it's like a clown show, but it's like he's literally wearing a clown mask, right? He's wearing a clown costume. You know, we're all a bunch of clowns up here, just you know, just doing the damn thing. So it was surreal the first day, especially. And you know, a couple days in, you're like, what the hell am I doing? What this is just wild. And you feel like you're just a part of, yeah, like a circus. But once I got in the flow of it, it became really fun. I mean, sometimes you're like, I would catch myself almost watching the the show, like all the the theatrics, and like
Mm.
I'm like, oh, I should be paying attention to what the hell I'm doing over here and not paying to see this thing. But dude, it was that was a big reason why I was attracted to it, was just doing something different, getting in a different world, being, and again, there's so much happening behind the scenes. They put so much work into that stuff, and you're this one little piece where like half the time people aren't even paying attention to you. So you have to just excel in your little role in this big collective. And it was just I love the professionalism of it all. I love how hard how hard they work, the attention to detail from Spencer and Joe, and like how like they're just like they're always listening, they're always and just trying to, and just being a part of that was just an incredible experience. And where they're at in their career, the success they're having, is once you get to experience it, you're not surprised at all that they're at the level that they're at. And I would not be surprised if they just keep going up and up and up.
For sure. Actually, I talked to Spencer yesterday for a little bit and brought up the fact that they're like ingrained in the Scream franchise now. You know, that poster teaser thing in Scream 6 is just kind of crazy how far those guys have gone. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have a visionary like Spencer, and then you have like the talent and the charisma and the vision and all that stuff, um, and just they've built their own little world, and their fans are like out of control, connected, and obsessed with what they do, and it's yeah, just to be part of that for a little piece of time was amazing. And the thing that's great is they kind of like they keep you in the fold, like you're kind of part of the family. So even when I was done touring with them, they invite me to events and book signings and different things like that. And it's great. You're just in the fold, and I love those guys.
that's rad. I did have a chance. I drove out to Denver last summer. Saw you guys at Red Rocks with Falling in Reverse. That show was crazy. Was that a different experience for you performing at such a high elevation outside?
Yeah, I mean, probably my favorite show with the band, and it had a you hear the rumors about, or the hype of, oh, it's Red Rocks, it's this, it's that, and then when you actually experience it, it really lived up to all those expectations, because it is a completely unique experience from a performing standpoint, because of just how the venue is set up, right? Because
Right.
very few venues where you're at the bottom and everyone is like up. There's certain amphitheaters that are um put together that way, but that you take that aspect plus the actual mountains, and the weather, and just I don't know, you feel like there's something special happening. And I think because of that, the band really was like functioning on all cylinders. Everyone brought the intensity, and the crowd was amazing. It just everything was in synchronicity. So it's like a show I'll remember forever.
That's awesome. I'm curious, who do you think right now is like the most important band in heavy music? Like if you had to list one or two, who would come to mind?
The most important band. That's a very good question. Because I think we're like in a sea change moment the last year, where I think a crop of bands have gone from like being like a band that could sell out a theater to is now playing arenas, and it's a few of them. It's the obvious ones, Sleep Token and Bad Omens and Spirit Box and bands like that. Um, but probably I still feel like Bring Me the Horizon is still the kind of the trendsetter that
Right.
everyone follows. They all seem to be uh, two steps ahead of everyone in terms of their kind of creative output and the kind of risks they take. They, in a weird way, they're kind of like the new version of like the Deftones, where like when like new metal was big, the Deftones would always zig when everyone else was zagging, because they didn't want to be like pigeonholed as like, oh,
Right.
this is what a new metal band does. And they'd always, and because of that, now they're like a lot bigger than a lot of those bands that were their contemporaries. And besides them being quote unquote big, they have like their fans are psychos. They're really dedicated, and I think that's how you get that kind of artistic credibility. So probably I would say Bring Me is probably the one, because and they also have that ability to cross over and bring people into the fold that are not necessarily rock fans,
Mm.
because of, the diversity of the material. um Ali is like this, he's an icon. He has that iconic presence that, ladies like him, and like, ladies like him and guys want to be him,
Exactly.
that kind of energy. um and and because of that, I still think they're the kind of that rallying point. And it'll be and it's weird. They've been around for a long time, but it seems like they're just now in the last 5 years, like really holding down that mantle as like being kind of one of the top dogs. So it'll be really interesting to see where their career goes. Maybe they'll, go from arena band to a stadium band. We'll see.
I hope so, man. They headline a lot of shows overseas, and so I'm interested to see them get those opportunities headlining maybe some of the Danny Wimmer festivals and stuff like that here in the US. Because I talked to Ollie last summer, and my boss here at the station had no idea, knows nothing about Bring Me the Horizon, right? And I said, hey, in the UK, they're headlining the second night of a festival that Metallica is headlining. I'm like, over there, they're huge. And so hopefully they get that same level of respect here in the States because they deserve it for sure.
Yeah, and listen, there's so many bands. I think there's all these little subgenres, right,
Mm.
that are connected to the overall umbrella, where bands are taking off, right? So you have, in the extreme world, you have bands like Lorna Shore and Slaughter to Veil. They're the biggest bands ever in that scene in the deathcore world, right?
Right.
You have bands like Amon Amarth, who's like a melodic death metal band who's like playing arenas, who is the biggest band in that genre that has ever been. You're seeing hardcore bands, bands like Turnstile, that these are the biggest hardcore bands have ever been. So in all these little sectors, you're seeing like success. I was thinking about it, like, I don't know if you follow Finn McKenty, who does like
Mhm.
punk rock NBA. He did this little clip, and I want to like debate him on this. He's basically like, rock is dying, or rock, it's not really big. And but using the metric that it's not as like mainstream as it was in like 2001 or something when you had TRL. But I would argue that maybe that's true in terms of penetrating pop culture, but I think the floor has elevated a lot. So maybe the ceiling isn't quite as big as it once was, but I think the floor has raised a lot, where you have a bigger collection of bands. So instead of like 10 bands becoming massive, you have 100 bands becoming very, very popular, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And spread out across a wider variety of styles. And so it's a different way of looking at it. Sometimes I think we look at data points, and it's all about how you interpret the situation. You can kind of draw any narrative you like to based on how you look at trends.
absolutely. Well, hey, we're about out of time, and I don't want to keep you too much longer. So thank you so much for hanging out today. I really appreciate it. Bad Wolf's going to be out on tour with POD this spring. Norma Jean on that bill as well. Doc, you've also got a podcast. Want to plug that real quick?
Yeah, it's called the X-Man Podcast. I've been doing it since 2016. What I do, I just dropped an episode this week with Moose Thomas, the former drummer of Bullet for My Valentine, and that's the show, the X-Man. The concept, it's like, oh, ex-members of bands. So
Right.
it's essentially a career retrospective show, but I'll pretty much talk to anybody. Uh, but it's I've been doing it a long time, a lot of fun, and yeah, check it out. All my social media, it's Coyle. I'm very, very easy to find.
There you go. Well, hey, thanks so much, man. We appreciate you.
Dude, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to the VORTX Podcast. Catch Ethan inside the Vortex every Sunday night from 9 to midnight on Topeka's rock leader, V100.